My story of losing weight is actually quite a long story. At one point, probably 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I was probably 310 pounds, somewhere in that area. And I lost some weight for some health concerns that I had back then. And I had lost a little bit of weight, just kind of going along. And I weighed probably 280 pounds, probably in 2009. I went to Bangladesh on some business that I had, some India and Bangladesh, and probably weighed 285 pounds. And you've seen some of those photos that I've got there of that. And at that point, I enjoyed walking. I had a blast, walking all over parts of India, being extremely overweight. It never stopped me from having fun. When I got married, I probably weighed the better part of 300 pounds. Then it didn't stop me from climbing to the top of the pyramids down in Mexico. I've always had fun. It's never stopped me. Um, but after I got married, the weight started coming off incrementally. And in 2010, I decided I was offered a job. I had my own business at that point, and I wasn't making as much money as I had before as the economy got really bad. And I started looking for different opportunities. And one opportunity that provided itself to me was to go to work as a contractor for the United States Army in Iraq. Well, one of the problems was they had a certain BMI that I had to be down to before I could be deployable. And so I did all the calculations and I worked with my doctor and knew where I was at and what I had to get down to. And I had to be. It depended on if I was 5'10" or 5'9.5" as to if I was going to make it at that cutoff level. So as I went to Fort Benning for my processing, I had already gone through my physical and got all the paperwork taken care of and had everything worked out. But it was like I had this fear in the back of my mind, man. If they put me on a scale and I am not 261 pounds, I may be too big to go, and they may turn me around and tell me to go home. Well, they didn't turn me around and tell me to go home, but I went there, and that was probably really good for me because I was on a very set eating schedule, and there are no 7-Elevens in Afghan. Well, there probably is something called 7-Eleven. There's probably some local that sets up a shop and calls it that. But the reality is, you're somewhat limited on when and what you can eat. And due to the fact that the United States government provides really great food 3 times a day for you if you want to go eat it, I ate on a regular schedule, but I got a lot of walking in and stuff. So I stayed down at the 255 to 260 range for quite a while. After Iraq, I went to Kuwait and lived there, and as part of my time there, my family came over and stayed with me for about 8 months. And like I said, I lots and lots of walking there. So I was doing a lot of exercising. Went to Afghanistan. I worked in a compound there that was 1 kilometer to walk around the outside parameter, the outside road of the compound that I was at, New Kabul compound, and it was wonderful. Had fun there, but I really didn't lose that much weight. Went home, then I got a job in Germany, and my weight stayed roughly the same at about the 250, 260 range. And one day, about a year ago, myself and some colleagues, we were sitting there and we're discussing, you know, what diets actually work and which ones don't. And there's so many out there. You can go vegetarian on one side and the Atkins diet on the extreme other side, and you got all these theories on how to lose weight. It's all about the calories, or it's all about the hormones, or it's something somewhere in between. Well, about 6 months before this conversation that happened about a year ago, I had had my own little theory going on, and part of that theory was, the Pareto principle probably would apply here. And I don't know if you're familiar with what the Pareto principle was. Pareto was this guy, business guy in Italy that stole a theory from somebody else, but basically what it said is, he applied it to economics, and he said, 80% of the wealth, or yeah, 80% of the wealth is held by 20% of the people in Italy, and that the reverse obviously was that 80% of the people only had 20% of the wealth. And then in management, people have applied that to say that 80% of your problems come from 20% of your people, and 80% of your work comes from 20% of your people. And I thought, I wonder, I'll bet, this keeps popping up all over the place, this 80-20 stuff. And I said, I'll bet 80% of my diet problems come from 20% of the food that I eat. And as I sat there and thought about it, I thought, I could probably name them on one hand, and it's the same ones that everybody else is. It's the what I drink, it's and most of my stuff was, I drank a lot of soda pop, but I also drank, juices, that everybody says, drink juice, it's good for you. Got lots of vitamin C, it's good for you. And I ate a lot of sugar, a lot of processed foods, a lot of sugars. I ate a lot of potatoes, a lot of French fries and potatoes and just potatoes of all forms. And I looked at it and I said, if I just cut the French fries and the breads and the pastas and the sugars, I could probably do really well. And at that point, I didn't cut the soda pop out, because I really didn't think. I thought, I drink a lot of soda pop, and we're talking diet soda pop, not soda pop that is, high in sugar, but stuff that wasn't. Well, as all this happens, back about a year ago, uh, myself and these same colleagues at work were like looking at, wow, maybe we should try it. And we were looking at different diets that were out there. One of the ladies was looking at uh, a diet plan where you eat like 8 meals a day, and part of them are liquid, and part of them are, you know, I think I don't remember how it all worked, but basically it restricted. You bought these packages of things, and to me that just seemed crazy because you're not going to, in my mind, if it's something I got to pay for, as soon as I stop paying for it, it's not going to work, and that didn't seem reasonable to me because I'm so cheap. And one of them was eating, and I don't remember how it all worked out, but it was like a bunch of eggs and steak or eggs and something else. It was like an egg diet was the cornerstone of it. And mine, I was going back and forth between intermittent fasting because I thought, hey, eating anything I want, but I can only do it during a certain period of time, might be kind of fun or might be doable for me. And the other one was, the low carb diet, and I thought, wow, a diet where I get to eat steak. That doesn't sound like a bad deal to me. Well, then I got researching it a little bit more and started understanding that part of the premise there is that in theory, if you're eating less carbohydrates, there's something that happens besides just the calories that you're not taking into your body that are just empty calories. You're looking at the glycemic index and how food interacts with the hormones in your body, and that if you're not getting a high level of insulin pumping through your body, you're not going to be storing fat. And also, as you're doing all of this, you are cutting down on what you eat, and your body is going to be reacting differently. Well, our initial thing was we said, hey, we're going to do it for 30 days. And during that 30 days, I lost 15 or 20 pounds, and I went, wow, this is cool. But actually, let me back up. Before we started this, because I work on a U.S. military base, and if you're a card holder, there are certain things that you can do that don't cost you anything. And they had the Army Wellness Center there, and one of the things that they had was a bod pod. So I could go in and I could, get my entire body measured and come out with a report that says you're X% body fat. Here's how many pounds of fat you've got. Here's how many pounds of lean muscle you've got, and you come out with a really clear picture of exactly where you're at and where you're going. And it was really interesting because I got to compare those numbers out of this, you know, huge, you know, probably $250,000 machine that they stick you in to measure soldiers when they're trying to say, are you too fat to be in the military? You know, there is no question as to how much fat you've got, and them and somebody saying, hey, I'm really strong underneath all this fat, and and this is all muscle. Well, when you get into that bod pod, they know exactly what they weigh. So before we started out, all of us we went and did the bod pod thing, and then we also went and did the thing where you test your resting metabolic rate, RMR, whatever, and they put a tent over you. So I knew all of these numbers going into it. I also knew my weight and all the basics, and so I lost 15 or so pounds during this initial time, and then that was right before the season of Lent, and one of the ladies that we were with was like, well, let's try something for Lent, you know, and because the first time around it had been kind of cool, and people lost some weight, and for me it was like, oh, no big deal, because I'm just still going for the first time around. I just didn't stop, and I kept losing weight. Um, and I have to tell you, there was some additional motivation there. I had read a book called The Power of Habit, and it has a lot, like the first third of the book has to do with personal habits and how they're created. And there's a cycle that they talk about, which is the trigger, and then the activity that you're doing, and the reward that you're doing. And so I started planning in as I was doing stuff. I started exercising. I started looking at rewards for doing what I wanted to be doing and how I was doing it. And by setting those, I started doing more exercising. I went from just walking around in a circle 2 or 3 times a day, getting 2 or 3 kilometers of walking in, which is about 30 or 40 minutes of walking, which was really great. And come to find out later that, some of the stuff I've read says that that's probably the best exercise for losing weight is just, a brisk walk as opposed to going out and taking off and running. But as it was wintertime and it got cold in February in Germany, I went to an indoor track and I would walk around. And at first, it was 10 laps around equal to mile. And I'd set the goal. I'd say, I'm going to walk for 2 miles, or a mile or two or whatever. And then after a while, that was getting really boring. So I was like, maybe I'll run a little bit. And maybe I'll run 1 or 2 laps and just see if I can do it before I drop dead, of a heart attack or whatever. And I started going, and I would go around the track, and I ran a couple of laps at a time. And then after a while, it was like, well, that was fun. Maybe I can make it to 10 laps, and I can do a mile. So I had done, a mile, and then it starts getting warmer outside, and I started running outside. And pretty soon, I'm doing, 3 or 4 kilometers at a time, and I'm really kind of enjoying it. It was like I was looking forward to that cycle. I got off work, hence the trigger. I'd go out and I'd run. Hey, this is fun. I'm enjoying this, and at the back end of that, hey, this is rewarding because I'm starting to feel better, and I'm enjoying what I'm doing. And I'd also go, give myself a couple fat bombs or whatever, which are these little things you make that are really high in fat that, back in the 70s, we probably would have lost our mind going, oh no, fat, we're going to freak out and die or whatever. But, if you buy into the keto side of it, you're going, oh, hey, I can fuel my body off of fat, and I'm not using any sugar to do this, or I'm not taking any sugar in. Your body may be creating sugar off of some processes that it's got going in the background, which it needs to do. But the bottom line is, I was making my way through the whole cycle, and I could look at it and go, yeah, I'm hitting all of these, and I'm doing it. Well, another thing that it talked about in the book was, the doing it for a purpose. And after I was running for a little while, it was like that purpose became, can I run a 5K? And back in the 1980s, when I was at BYU, I had a roommate and myself and about 5 or 6 other people. We decided we were going to run the St. George Marathon. Well, I got to be about a week and a half, 2 weeks from the marathon, and I got bronchitis. And I got so sick and so bad. There were times, I kept trying to work out. Well, probably about 3 weeks before the marathon, got bronchitis. That man, everything would just constrict. I couldn't breathe. It was terrible. And so I didn't get to run the marathon. All the running stopped right there. Well, as I started running around this little lap, little thing, I kept thinking in the back of my mind, boy, that would be kind of fun to go run a marathon. Get back out and do that. And I was like, well, let's see. I'll do the 5K first. And I did a 5K. And then I was like, I'll run a 10K. And I ran a 10K, and that was fun. And then it bit somewhere in the back of my mind. I started looking at half marathons, and I signed up for the Eifel Half Marathon, which is in the kind of over on the west side of uh, Germany. There's the Eifel region, and they had a race there, and I went and signed up for it. It was during June of last year, and I was all excited for it until I got there, and I realized that Eifel is this wonderful region that's like these mountains that go straight down for about 300 feet and back up on the other side, and it's steep as anything. And I was thinking, what did I get myself into? I must have been crazy. Well, I went and ran it. I was the best loser of the marathon. I fought hard to make sure that that one woman from Romania that was in front of me was behind me. And that was my success in this marathon, was that I was not the last person to cross the line. She was behind me. So I finished that one. Uh, I since ran about 5 or 6 other half marathons, and I had signed up for with some other folks that I was friends with. We got talking about running and marathons, and after a while, it kind of becomes a little bit of an obsession. And we were talking about what their goals were and what they wanted to do, and we happened to have a common goal, which was to run a marathon. And then we started looking at them, and we were looking at running the Greece Marathon. So we started planning and training. We went and ran the Greece Marathon in uh, 2019, which it was one of those November races, and it was incredibly fun. The only problem was about 15 kilometers of that race is uphill. And we ran it, and there were so many people that were so out of weight, out of shape, that many of them were behind me when I finished the marathon, and it was just great to do that. Which I can't say the same thing for the half marathons. I would say at least 3 of the 6 half marathons that I finished, I was the last guy coming across the line. I am the best loser of half marathons that you're ever going to meet. I got to know the guy on the bike that runs, the last one, that follows the last runner in. On some of those, I was that last runner coming, and I got to know the guy on the bike as I was going, which is really embarrassing when you have to go to the bathroom and the guy has to wait for you outside of the porta potty while you're going to the bathroom. Who cares? You know what? You know what they call the guy that finishes a marathon in a 6.5 hour time? They call him a finisher, and I finished the marathon, and it was great. And then after I got through with that marathon, it was like, well, what's the next marathon? And this running the Athens Marathon, from Marathon to Athens, Greece was fantastic. It's like great. It was a wonderful experience. 30 something thousand, 37,000 people running in the events that day. Then I started looking at others. I was looking at one in the Dead Sea, which looked really fun. And if they'd had a better website, I probably would have signed up for that one. But I couldn't really tell if it was a shaky, legitimate site or not. I've since found out that it was, but I didn't want to give somebody my credit card number for something that wasn't. Uh, then I thought, I looked at the Marrakesh Marathon. And man, that one looked really fun. Go run a marathon in North Africa. And part of my goal here is I'd like to hit a marathon on each continent. And so I ran the North Africa one, or the Africa one, in Marrakesh, and it was great. I got halfway through that marathon. I got to about mile marker 25 ish, or not mile marker, but kilometer marker 25 and I ran past the aid station. I looked over and there was like 5 bottles of water on the table. And I had read some reviews of it that said sometimes the logistics on this one isn't too good. And normally, you grab the bottle of water or the cup of water, you drink a little bit of it, a couple of good mouthfuls, you get about 4 ounces of water. You throw it on the ground, you keep running because you know that 5 kilometers later there's another one that you're going to get some more water. And something told me, don't throw this bottle of water. It's like an 8 ounce or 12 ounce bottle of water. Don't throw it on the ground. Just put it in the pocket back in the back of your shirt and keep running. Because I had like one of those runner biking shirts that had big pockets in the back of it. So I just went ahead and threw it in there and just kept running. That was the last water I saw for the rest of the marathon. So I finished about the last half of the marathon or the last third of the marathon with absolutely no water at all. And in the back of my mind, I keep thinking, I'm in North Africa. Yeah, this isn't known for the best healthcare in the world. Heat stroke, dehydration, that's not what I want to be experiencing here. This could be a real problem. So I had to back off a little bit on my time. However, I got there in 6 hours. I finished my marathon in 6 hours, which I may be, a fat guy running, but hey, I finished the marathon, which is something that a lot of my friends that weigh, are 170 pounds and are 25 years younger than me, they can't say they did it, and I finished it. It may have been a slow time, but guess what? I finished it, and it doesn't matter. I've just kept going. I've right after uh, that marathon, or right around the same time as that marathon, no, it was about 3 weeks before that. I got notified that I got that message from the Berlin Marathon. They said, normally you get these messages and they say, we're sorry. But that's not what this message says. Congratulations, you have been selected to run the 2020 Berlin Marathon. So I will be going and running the Berlin Marathon in September of this year. So I've got my next goal out there ahead of me to keep me running and keep me going. I'm also looking at some triathlons that I would like to run. As soon as it warms up just a little bit, I'll be riding my bike to work some days. Right now, as it's brutally cold back home, I am going to the swimming pool 2 or 3 days a week and swimming, which is great because I get to take my son with me and I get to count it as daddy time as well as, working out time. I get to double dip on that one. But, you just got to keep going. I have lost from where I was to I've got this picture that everybody makes fun of because when I got down to 200 pounds, I stepped down on the scales and took a picture of the 200 or 198 point something on the scales. And what I really got are these big feet that look like claws hanging over the end of the scales that everybody just kept making fun of me about. But you know what? I did it. I'm down below 200, which I've since come back up just about 5 pounds. But yeah, I can get back down there. All I have to do is not drink water for half a day and run a lot, and I'll be back down there. But that is my story.